My cheap Mazda MX5. So if you don't know, I bought this car on a bit of a budget to do some track days, maybe some drift days, and just build a track inspired build really. We did buy it with a failed MOT, however in the first video we got some of them items fixed. So, the headlights, they're now all clear. The screen wash now works. And the rust on the sill has been repaired. That means there's only one more thing left to get this car through an MOT, and that's fit coilovers. That's what we're doing in this video, so let's get into it. So, my plan is here to use these ramps, drive the car up the ramps, and then it should raise the car enough that I can put the jack under the subframe to just pick the front end of the car up, put my axle stands in place, and then we can move on to getting the coilovers fitted. Now that the car's up the ramp, we can get a jack under the front here to try and lift it up a little bit. So I've put the axle stands underneath the bottom arms on the joints, jacked it up off the subframe, so now I can pull the ramps out of the way and then we can lower it down onto the axle stands. Okay, so now the car's on the axle stands and the ramps are out from underneath the wheels, we can take the wheels off. I definitely do need to invest in a gun at some point because it would make little jobs like this so much easier than using the ratchet. I have just changed the angle of the axle stands just to make sure it's not putting any pressure on the bottom arm. So you may notice, but this suspension setup looks very similar to the Supra that we did. If you've not seen that video, click the right hand corner of the screen. But from that video, we did learn not to mess around and just take this top bolt out. So I think that's what I'm going to do here, is just undo this top bolt, but looking at it, it means that we're going to have to undo these two bolts here just to lower the anti-roll bar a little bit, just so that this bolt will come out, because the studs on the top there, it will hit them. So let's get on with undoing these two bolts. So all I am doing here is just loosening these bolts off. I'm not taking them out completely because it's just the threads that are stopping the top bolt from coming out. So if we just lower them enough, then the bolt will still be able to come out and then we don't have to struggle putting the anti-roll bar back on. As you can see at the top here, look, you can just see that the threads have dropped just enough so that this top bolt should come out from the upper arm. On the passenger side, we do exactly the same. We just lower the bolt enough so that the upper arm bolt can come out without fouling. I'm 90% sure that these bolts were a 10mm, but I'm not definite. And once both of these have been lowered, we can move on to the suspension strut. Now that that's undone, we can undo the bottom bolt from this side. Okay, so this is the passenger side and we've moved on to undoing the bottom shock absorber bolt. This is a 17mm. I did use my breaker bar just to free it off, and then once that was done, it started spinning. So we put my spanner on one side and my ratchet on the other side just to get it out. Once this side's completely done, we then have to move on to the driver's side. Onto the driver's side, we do exactly the same thing. So using my breaker bar to break it off and then moving on to the spanner and the ratchet. These bolts came out quite easy, to be fair. I can only presume it's because the car already has coilovers on it, so I'm guessing they weren't taken out that long ago. Okay, so now that we've lowered the anti-roll bar link a little bit, as you can see there is quite a lot of movement there. So I'm just going to try and undo the top mounts and see how much room we have got, see if we can just get the coilovers out without removing that top bolt. So moving on to the top mounts and undoing these were a 14mm. Once these were taken off, so the shock absorber is now completely free from the car, it was very loose, as you can see in this next clip. Okay, so this clip is sped up quite a bit because it did take a while of like jumping up and down on the hub, so to speak, just fiddling around with it just to make the shock absorber come out, but in the end we got there. Okay, so that came out quite easy, to be fair. We had to stand on the hub a little bit, just try and wiggle it out. But let's see if we can do the same on the other side. So same again on this side. We loosened off the top mounts. However, on this side, once the top mounts were loose, the coilover virtually fell out, as you can see in this clip now. So a little bit of sand on the hub just to lower the shock a bit more, and it came out straight away. That side came out even easier than the other side. Okay, so that's the old ones out, and we have the new ones over here. As you can see, the new ones do look longer than the older ones, so I presume the ride height will be higher, but I'm going to try and fit them to the car first, and then we'll lower it down, see if it is monster trucking, and if it is, then we'll adjust it accordingly. Okay, so this didn't go to plan. We tried to fit the new coilover, however, because these new coilovers had the dampening adjustment on the top, they wouldn't go in as easy as the old ones fell out, so it just didn't work. So because of that, we then had to find a way to make these fit. So we started off by loosening the drop links completely off of the bottom arm, and that's what we're doing now. So as you can see, we've got the spanner on there, and we're using the Allen key to turn the anti-roll bar link to loosen it off, rather than trying to use the spanner to take it off. Okay, so once the anti-roll bar link was off, we then moved on to splitting the bottom arm. So here, we use a 17mm, this got 2 bolts in it. One's a pinch bolt that goes to the bottom that we're undoing now, and then once that's done, we move on to the bolt that's on the top. This was extremely stiff. On the other side, I do show you a bit better where we split it, but on this side, because this was the first side I did, I couldn't get it recorded because of how stiff this bolt was. I genuinely thought we were snapping it, and I just had to move the camera out of the way. In this next clip, I say there's 3 bolts, but there isn't. There is only 2. Okay, so what I've done now is I have undone, or split the bottom ball joint, so to speak. So this bit here goes inside the arm. There's 3 bolts. I've undone them, and now hopefully we can get the shock absorber into this gap, because before it was just fouling here, so let's try and get it in. Okay, so this bit here, I wrestled with it for ages by myself, but in the end I just didn't have enough arms, so I moved on to the next resort. Okay, so I've just used the jack to hold the hub out of the way here, and now hopefully I can get it in. So with the jack holding the hub out of the way with the upper arm, I then tried wrestling again with it by myself, but unfortunately I still didn't have enough arms. So I moved on and asked my girlfriend to come and help me. So as you can see, she's currently helping me now, and in the end, we got it in. Okay, after a lot of wrestling, that's finally in now. So it's not all bolted up. We're going to move over to the other side whilst I've got my girlfriend's help, and then get that side in. Okay, so because I didn't show it very well on the other side, I'm going to show it on this side a bit better. So we have a 17mm that goes in there. So the shocker sits down here. So this bolt's just there. So we have 17mm there that we have to undo. And then we also have a little 17mm just there that you can see, and then it's 2 bolts. I think on the other side I said it was 3, but it is just the 2. So there's a big one down the bottom and then one in the middle that holds it in. So this one on the top is extremely tight, so let's try and get it undone. There was a few times I took the breaker bar off and tried to just use the ratchet, but it was just too tight and I didn't fancy breaking the ratchet. So the breaker bar it was, slow and steady, eventually come out. We loosened it off, tightened it up, sprayed a lot of WD-40 on there, but in the end, we got it out. Like I say, I thought they were both snapping, to be fair, so I'm thankful that they both come out without breaking. Once it was loosened off enough, I moved on to the ratchet, so as you can see, it was with the ratchet that we loosened it off and tightened it. I did have to put a bar on the end of it, just so I had more leverage when undoing it and tightening it, because I still am only using a 3/8 ratchet. And finally, we get the bolt out. Now that the stiff bolt's out on the passenger side, we just need to undo this bottom bolt. So same again on the other side. It was a 17mm, ratchet on one side and spanner on the other side. So now that we've split the hub away from the bottom arm, the final piece on the passenger side to get it ready for the new coilover is undoing this drop link, which we're currently undoing now. So exactly the same as the driver's side, we just use the spanner to hold it still and use the Allen key to loosen it off and get it undone. I think this is the first set of drop links I've ever removed and they haven't rounded off. So this is the coilover for the passenger side. We did adjust it in the end to try and make it fit, so I'm just going to adjust this one as well. Making it as short as possible, just so it's easy to try and get it in that gap. Let's go and fit it. Okay, so we're going to do the same again with the passenger side and wrestle with the coilover to try and get it into place. As you can see, we did get a bit more footage of the passenger side, and I think this is because this is the second side that we did. So I used my leg to push the bottom arm down whilst my girlfriend put the coilover into place. Okay, so that's the coilovers in both sides temporarily. Obviously nothing's bolted in at all. So let's do the top mounts just to hold it into place at the top. Okay, so now we can get the top mounts bolted into place. Now we can move on to the driver's side. and do exactly the same thing. So now that the top mounts are bolted in, we can put the bottom ball joint back onto the bottom arm. So putting the bottom ball joint back in was pretty much the same as how we did to take it off, just in reverse. The only thing I would say is when you're pushing the bottom ball joint into the bottom arm, there is 2 bolts, like I say. So there's one bolt that clamps at the bottom and one bolt that screws in down the top. And when the arm goes in, you need to make sure it's bang on straight so the arm in the top will screw in. I did screw in the pinch bolt on the back first, and it just meant that the other bolt wasn't in line, so that just never screwed in. So I just used a little flathead screwdriver to push the bottom of that hub, so to speak, into place. That's why this side took slightly longer than the driver's side, because on the driver's side I just did it straight away because I knew what I was doing essentially, whereas on this side I'd never done it before. Now that that's done, we're going to move on to fitting the anti-roll bar link back into place. So to bolt the drop link back into place, it was exactly the same as it was to remove it, just in reverse. So a 17mm spanner to hold the nut into place, and then I just used the Allen key to tighten it up. Like I say, I can't believe I actually managed to get both of these drop links off and back on the car without rounding a single thing off. Once the drop link was all nice and tight, we then moved on to bolting the bottom of the shock absorber to the bottom arm. So same again, just hold the arm into place, push the bolt through, and then put the nut on the end. Spanner on one side and my ratchet on the other, just to tighten it up and stop it from spinning. Once that's done, the passenger side at the bottom is complete. Okay, so that's the passenger side all bolted up. Now let's move on to finishing off the driver's side. So I'm going to do the same again, where I put the bottom hub in first, and then the drop link, and then the shock absorber. Now that side's all tightened up, it's just time to tighten the anti-roll bar back up to the chassis. Okay, so that's both the fronts finished. Now I'm just going to try and adjust them and make them roughly around the same. So they're both on the lowest setting as far as I'm aware. So I'm just going to adjust the springs accordingly this time. So the gap on the other side is roughly as big as this. So this side is about twice the size, I think. Not 100% sure whether to lower it or make them both a bit higher. I might do the other side the same size as this side and then see how it comes out. So this side is, yeah, pretty much 2 of them. So if I go and do the other side the same, we'll see how it looks once we've lowered the car back down. Okay, so I'd say they're around the same now. So let's put the wheels on, lower the car down and see how it looks. Okay, so the fronts have a massive arch gap, so they need adjusting before I do the rears, because it's just be easier. So let me jack it up and quickly adjust them again. Okay, so this bit at the bottom here is as low as it can possibly be. There's a small gap left here, so I'm just going to lower it as much as it'll possibly go, and then we'll have a look at it and see what it looks like then. Okay, now that we've lowered the coilovers to as low as they will possibly go, we can put the car down and see how it looks. Okay, so there still is a bit of an arch gap there. However, I am aware these coilovers are brand new, so we'll leave it like this for now and see if it settles over the next coming days. But for now, I just need to tighten up the top mount, so then we can move on to the rear. Okay, let's move on to the rear. So for the rear of the car, I'm jacking it up off the diff, and then I'll put the axle stands probably here. Okay, so for the rear of the car, I'm going to start off by undoing this bolt here. So this bolt is the same size as the one that's on the front, just slightly longer. So it's a 17mm. There also isn't a nut on the other side, so it just screws out. Next up, we need to move into the boot and undo the top mount. So I'm unsure if there's meant to be a cover this side. It doesn't look like there is, but there is one this side. So, I mean, these are only finger tight on mine, but I'm sure you'll have to undo them properly on yours if you have one. But once this is out of the way, I presume we'll be able to see the top mount. So just down there, you can just see the top mount. You can't really see the one on the other side due to the fuel pipe being in the way. So I'll just record this side and then it'll be the same for the other side, just with the fuel pipe in the way basically. Okay, so both the top mounts are now undone inside and both the bolts are undone at the bottom. So on the rears, they're normally a lot easier than the fronts. So I'm pretty sure if we just stand on the hub now, the rears should pretty much just fall out, to be honest. So let's give that a try and see how it goes. Okay, so that's the rears out relatively easy. Now the fronts came out a lot easier than the new ones went in because the dampening adjusting at the top here. So let's get a new rear one and let's have a look and see how much more difficult it is. Okay, so there's the old coilover next to the new one. I'm going to do the same again that what we did with the front one, where we lowered it as much as we can because the front one's monstruous. So I'm just going to try it on the rears and see how it comes out. Okay, so this is the bottom maxed out and there is this much gap, so I'm not sure how low to go on it. And looking at it, it is a little bit taller than the old one that came off, but the front is now higher than what it was originally. So I might just lower it a tiny bit so it's around the same size as this one, because I think this spring will compress differently to how these two will. So if we lower it so it's around the same size as this one, and then hopefully it should be about the same height as the front really. Okay, so looking at it, when we lower this a little bit more, so that spring's now loose in there. So I'm tempted to just, we'll put it so that it's like that, so it's a tiny bit loose, and then see how it looks once it's on the car. Obviously, same as the fronts, these are brand new, so I'll have to fit them, and then whatever it looks like, I will have to leave it for a few days just to see how it settles. But we'll fit them like that, and then see how it looks. Okay, so that's both the coilovers in place. They're just in situ at the minute, nothing's bolted in. Unfortunately, I didn't get any clips of this. We tried to, but they didn't come out very well. Because there was two of us fitting them, we couldn't get both of us in the wheel arch and also get a camera in there as well. But basically what we did, we put it in the top first, and then the other person stood on the hub to lower it down. And then once the hub was lowered, you could fit it into the gap at the bottom. Now that that's done, we can move on to bolting the top mount up. That's the top mounts bolted up both sides, so now it's just time to do this bottom bolt down here. Now to move on to the other side. Okay, so that's all the suspension bolted up on the car. So now the final thing to do is put these wheels on, which we're doing now, and then lower the car down, and then that's it. The car's finished and we can take it for its MOT. Okay, so the coilovers are now fitted, which means we've had the car MOT'd and it's passed, which means we can now drive it. As you can see, the sun's shining and we've got the roof down, so we're loving life. The only thing is I have noticed something with the coilovers, and I'll show you now. So these front coilovers are on the lowest possible setting that they can be. However, there is still quite a big arch gap in there. I'm not really sure why I can't lower it anymore. Whereas the rears, I've set the rears to be the same as the front just so it drives okay, but the rears I can lower that by around 2 inches still. So I'm unsure what that is on the fronts, but if anyone does know, then let me know in the comments section. Okay, so that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you smash that subscribe button. Obviously there's a lot more we need to do to this car as well as the other cars on the channel, so make sure you check in on them and I'll catch you there.